Hi there, welcome to Q&A Wednesday. It is time again to talk about your questions concerning your health goals. So we're going to talk today, a great topic, about why you should be eating more. And of course, most of us are thinking that makes no sense, right? Because, most of us want to lose weight. And what that means, according to, most that we hear is, well, eat less and move more, which to an extent is true. But again, there's some issues behind that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I can see my daughter peeking in the back behind me today. I think she forgot that I'm doing this right now. But again, so for those of you just joining us, we are talking about why it's important to eat more. And so I'm going to cover a couple things before we really jump into what that means. And the first one is, of course, for any of you who have been listening to me for any amount of time, you know that I fully believe in lifestyle versus, diet. There's a big difference there. Diet is something that we do temporarily to reach a goal, but we know that we're only going to stay there temporarily. And then so Momo says, eat less junk, more real food. True. So again, a diet is something that's temporary. A lifestyle is a totally different ballgame, because that is something that, we can do for the rest of our lives. Because I don't know anybody who says, I want to reach my health goal and then I'm going to completely go backwards and go exactly back to where I was before. But in order to stay where you are, you have to continue to do what you were doing before. So finding that balance is really super important. I really believe that, I can do anything temporarily. I mean, come on, I can cut out sugar for 16 weeks before I get on stage. But if I had to cut out everything that I love for the rest of my life, I probably wouldn't stick with it. So finding that balance is super important. That's why I believe lifestyle versus diet. So keep that in mind in the first place. Number two, let's talk a little bit about metabolism. Everybody's metabolism is different. And one of the things I find interesting when I start working with people as clients, a lot of times I have to fix their metabolism, because first of all, the first thing that people usually do when they come up with a goal is they start eating a ridiculously small amount of calories, because again, they've heard all this gimmicky garbage about how, a 1,200 calorie 1,200 calories is the right amount of calories when you're on a diet, and that is garbage. So stop listening to what people say, unless they can prove that it works. And granted, 1,200 calories might work temporarily. The problem is, you guys realize that is the minimum amount of calories that someone should eat to not have extreme issues resulting from starvation of the body. Your body does not know the difference between a diet and starvation. And when you eat that few of calories, your body goes into starvation mode, and literally you might drop, but it's probably going to be muscle and water, right? And again, that's not healthy, because guys, muscle is a natural fat burner. The more muscle you have, the more fat you will burn, the higher your metabolism. So keep in mind that, if you're somebody who's 250 pounds and you're eating 1,200 calories, you're kind of screwed, because there's no way to go down from that. What happens when you drop 50 pounds? Are you going to eat under 1,200 calories? There's no way to work with that. And again, I'm going to approach that in a minute, again, because I believe so strongly in that. Food is fuel, food is nutrients. And so your goal is to get what you need out of it to make your body run and run well. If you're putting a bunch of junk food in there, it's kind of like putting really cheap, crappy gas in your car. Your car might go, but it kind of sputters and complains and groans as it tries to go down the road. You want to put premium fuel in that car. So, put premium food in your body, which means clean, healthy food. Now, that being said, I like to talk about when is a calorie not really a calorie, because there's this whole idea of calories in, calories out, which to some extent is true. It just doesn't take enough detail into consideration. The problem is a calorie is not always a calorie. When a calorie is from processed food, say my favorite example is a Pop-Tart, because I've had a knockdown, drag out argument with a Pop-Tart in the middle of the store. When do you know you've been consuming too much protein? Okay, that's a good question. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And there is such a thing as consuming too much protein. Macros is something that a lot of people look at, which is also important. And we're going to talk about that in a sec as well, because, how much of each macro you should be eating depends upon your goal. Okay. And so I'll come back to that. So that's a really good question there, Freya. So when is a calorie not really a calorie? Well, when it's a processed calorie. So like I said, say with a Pop-Tart, your body absorbs so much more of that because it's already processed into a form that your body extracts from it really quickly. And unfortunately, when they talk about empty calories, that's a good example of that, because there's really no healthy benefits to that Pop-Tart, because it contains a lot of, it's sugars, enriched flour, it's a lot, and not to mention things that make it shelf stable. So things like additives, preservatives, and those technically are toxins. Your body does not know how to deal with those. And so it immediately shuttles all those things away into your storage unit of the body, which is your fat. Now, when it's a whole clean option, so say an apple, because even though an apple contains simple sugars, it still is a whole food which contains a lot of vitamins, minerals, and also a lot of fiber as well, which slows down the absorption rate of the sugars into your system. So obviously an apple, though also a carbohydrate, along with a Pop-Tart, which is a carbohydrate, which one's the better option? The apple obviously is. Your body's not going to absorb it the same as it will a processed food like the Pop-Tart. So a calorie is not always a calorie. Keep that in mind if you are tracking and you're like, well, hey, I'm under my calories every day by like 300, 400, 500 calories. Are those calories from processed foods or are they from whole foods, right? Because your body treats them differently. Nancy says, yes, empty calories are not good. This is why I stopped drinking soda. Good. Because you know what? Soda is probably one of the worst things that you could possibly, because honestly, if it's full strength soda and you're drinking it with all the sugar in it, I have a wonderful friend who used to drink a 6-pack of Mountain Dew on a daily basis. And I think we finally figured out one day how much sugar that was on a daily basis. And it was enough to make her stop drinking it. She actually quit cold turkey. I was really proud of her. But even if you're going with a diet sodas also usually contain aspartame, which has actually been shown to cause cancer. And if it's not aspartame, even Splenda, in limited doses, it's okay. But for those of us that are struggling to maybe lose some weight or to reach our health goal, the problem with Splenda is that it's a sugar derivative. And so the sweetness, the taste on your tongue actually produces a round of insulin just like sugar would, because your body is expecting with that sweetness to actually take in carbohydrates. And then when you don't actually take in carbohydrates because you're sucking down a diet soda all day, that's actually eventually what causes insulin resistance and can play a huge part in type 2 diabetes. So again, everything within balance or within reason. Soda is not always your best idea. I know I'm totally off on a tangent. Okay, so we talked about when is a calorie not always a calorie, when it's being absorbed differently because it's either a processed or a whole food, okay? All right, so let's talk about why we should actually eat more. So here's what usually happens when I work with a new client. I usually get in a client and, you know, they've started on this whole diet process, and so they're eating a ridiculously small amount of calories, and what happens is your body will actually drop its metabolism to meet that low intake of calories. So when people say, you know, I went on this diet, and then when I went off of it, I gained everything back plus some, it's because you're eating that amount of food that you used to eat, but on top of no metabolism, because you basically starved your body and it expected not to get anything, and so it went into starvation mode. So let me give you kind of a picture idea of this. So, you know, if you own a big like dually pickup diesel, usually has 2 tanks of fuel, right, for fuel, and so it takes an awful lot of fuel to fill those tanks up, right? Now a Mazda 3, which is what I used to drive, has a teeny tiny tank, and it doesn't require nearly as much fuel as that big dually pickup. Not to like make people sound like they're vehicles, but you know, kind of get the idea here, right? If you are 250 pounds, right, and you're only eating 1,200 calories, what happens when you drop 50 pounds? The smaller the car, the smaller the gas tank. All of a sudden, you don't need as much as you did when you were 250 calories. You're now, or 250 pounds, you're now 200 pounds. But if you're already eating absolutely nothing, you have nothing to drop to. And then people wonder why they plateau and they can't lose any more weight. It's because your body has realized you're starving. And so it literally locks on and holds on to everything that you give it. What happens when I work with someone in that situation is I increase their food and their calories by quite a bit. Now here's the fun thing, because it's healthy food, it's a lot more volume. Clean whole foods have, of course, a lot less calories. Things like pizza, processed foods, contain a whole lot of calories in a small amount, right? You know, I can eat 3 pieces of pizza and that's my normal entire day's worth of calories all on one, you know, in one feeding. So what happens is they go to eating all these clean whole foods, it's a lot of volume, and they're going, this is too much food. I shouldn't be eating this much. 1,200 calories. Stop listening to what media tells you because they're full of crap and they're trying to sell you something. This is free information, guys. This is called smart, right? This is called common sense, which apparently nobody has anymore. you have to feed. Here's the best way to do it. I've got some tips for you. And the first one is, if you're not sure how many calories you burn in a day, get a Fitbit, get something that tracks what you actually burn. I already know that I burn between 24 and 2,600 calories in any given day. So if I eat 1,200 calories, my deficit of calories to my energy level is so small, my body thinks I'm in starvation, and it literally will start holding on to everything. So I eat between 1,900 and 2,200 calories a day. I'm still at a slight deficit, but that keeps me to maintain a little bit. Now, when I'm trying to grow, I actually increase that. And when I lean out, I start to decrease that in small amounts. I don't all of a sudden go to 1,200 calories. I might start out at 2,000 and then go down to 1,800 and then go down to 1,600, right? The smaller I get, the less food I need, the less fuel I need. Okay, hold on. I got to make sure I'm reading everything. When it comes to feeding or fueling your body, does it make a difference when choosing between, I can't read it all. Hold on. Commercial brand chicken versus organic? Yes. Okay, so here's the problem with that. Obviously, when you have an option to choose better options of chicken or proteins, such as grass-fed, free range, the first problem is what it is and what it says it is isn't always what you think. Unfortunately, organic, there's a lot of connotations behind that. You have to actually do some research. So like when you're purchasing organic food or organic plants, say vegetables or fruits, organic only means that they are not using commercial pesticide on those products. It doesn't mean they're not using pesticide. They're not using synthetic. Sorry, I got to make sure I add that word. They're not using synthetic pesticide on that food. Yes, I know that can be a good thing. It can be not such a great thing. There's a lot of loopholes in there. So make sure, to be truly organic, grow it yourself. Or your better option is hit the farmer's market, buy your product locally. You're going to get a much fresher, better product. A lot of times they need to put things with it or on it in order to preserve it, to make it to its end goal, which is of course your town. And so things like protein, when it says it's grass-fed, yes, obviously going to be a better option, because in this day and age, when they're adding a lot of synthetic hormones and things to it, you can be eating things that you don't necessarily, because what you eat what they eat, right? So if you get products that is just from just the grocery store and you don't know where it's been, obviously not as great of an option as something that is grass-fed, or that you can prove that it's a little bit better option. The downside is you're going to pay more for it. So hi, Nayeli. And hey, Noe there too. Boy, all kinds of great people today. So keep in mind that there's going to be a balance. Sometimes you can find lists of things that are worth buying organic or worth buying grass-fed, things like that. Obviously, if you can buy proteins that are grass-fed, free range, that's kind of a weird one, because all that means is that there's like a little hole in the wall that they can actually get outside in a little enclosed area, so they can go outside. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're running across the country free. Again, if you're not sure about those things, look up the requirements for that the USDA puts out there, so you really know what we're talking about, because a lot of times it sounds good, but you don't necessarily know. Kind of like genetically modified seedless watermelon. Is that even an option? If it's seedless, how is it not genetically modified? Those kind of things. So again, pay attention to what it is that you're eating, but that is a very good question. If you can buy some of those better organic, grass-fed, it's going to be a better option, because you're not getting all the garbage, the hormones, that they're feeding some of those animals, so they can fatten them up faster and get them back, to the slaughterhouse. Now, if you're vegan, totally understand your position. Just know that vegan's a little harder to get all your proteins in. And back to the protein question. How do you know that you're getting too much protein? First of all, you should be tracking. Secondly, you hopefully already know what your formula is for your goal. Most people aren't getting enough protein. When I work with someone and I start giving them their macros for what their goal is, they're like, oh my gosh, I cannot get that much protein in. Can be a struggle. That's where a protein shake can help, and kind of coming up with some modifications. But I'm not sure that most people I know do eat too much protein. That's something we kind of have to cover one-on-one, because again, everybody's different. Now, I've actually been studying a little bit about the blood type diet, which I find fascinating, and anytime that I can learn something new and do some research, I love it. So I totally know that there's some benefits behind this. Depends on your blood type. your blood type determines how acidic your stomach is, and it can determine whether or not you break proteins down better than some. So like type O, like I am, we are meat eaters. We have the stomach acid. We can break that stuff down. We love beef. Type A, not so much. You tend to need a little more towards the plant-based proteins. So fascinating information, guys. You know, anytime that you can do some research on yourself because you're your own best advocate might be a great idea. So keep that in mind. I'll come up with some more things to talk about on that later. But okay, so we talked a little bit about why more food is better. Again, it depends on where you're at. When I was 210 pounds, and for those of you that have never met me before, yes, little 5'3" me, I'm not even 5'3" anymore. At one point in my life was 210 pounds at my very heaviest. At that time, I was eating, when I finally started tracking and learning a little bit more about how nutrition works together with exercise, I started eating about 2,400 calories and I was losing weight. That's because at 210 pounds, even my basal or my resting metabolic rate was fairly high. And knowing as I was tracking my energy output and how many calories I was burning in a day, that was a deficit, right? My body was burning about 3,000 calories a day. So the bigger you are, the more food you need. Even when you're trying to be at a deficit, 1,200 calories isn't going to cut it. Freya says, you're always going to be my number one fitness influence. Oh, thank you. Oh, she's lost 30 pounds. Freya, you're amazing. And 10 pounds of muscle. Girl, that makes me happy. That makes me so happy. You know what? I'm more excited about your success than I am about my own. It's kind of like being a mom. We just get all excited about our people. So the best way, this is my best tip on how to know how many calories you should be eating. And of course, if you're not sure, and if you're not sure what your macros are, that's something that I do. Contact me directly through Messenger. But if you know how many calories you're burning in a day, just kind of a quick, easy way to figure it out is figure out your calorie burn, your average calorie burn, and then subtract about 500 calories. And that should be your intake for the day. Because honestly, if you're trying to lose more than 2 pounds a week, number one, that's not sustainable. You're probably at too big of a deficit. And again, your body's going to go into starvation mode. We're looking at long-term here, guys. It's not how quickly you can get there. It's how long can you stay there once you reach your goal. Again, nobody wants to get there and then go directly backwards because they just go back to their bad habits. And you can't make habit lifestyle changes in 30 days. It's going to take 90 days plus, even just to make 1 or 2 habit changes. So, keep that in mind that it's not okay to go fast unless you've already got the basics down and then you're focused on something small that's short term. Like, hey, I just need to drop 5 pounds to feel good in my bikini, or hey, I'm going to get on stage. That's a little different ball game. But to really get your basics down, you've got to make it a lifestyle. This is, Fry says preach. Girl, this is coming from somebody who was once very unhealthy to somebody who now maintains a great health, and I have for about 9 years now. So, and of course, those calories need to come from clean, whole foods. Now, again, macros do different things. The different macros do different things. Fats are help you synthesize all of the nutrients and utilize them correctly. They also help all your hormones. So fats are necessary. Carbs is your energy source. If you eat too many carbs, why would your body target your fat as fuel? It's already getting its energy from somewhere else. But carbs are necessary because if you don't, your body's going to take the proteins that you eat, it's going to break it down and turn it into glucose, and instead of helping you build and maintain muscle, which is what protein's job is, it's going to turn it to glucose and utilize it as energy. So knowing what your goals are, and that's how we determine your macros, right? I use this every day, so I know kind of how that works there. That's one of my goals and my focus is to help people learn that it's not just, the garbage that you hear on TV and on social media. So here's my tips. Again, find out how much that you burn in a day. Subtract 500 calories. That's kind of a good starting point. Any more than that, I would say any more than 1,000 calorie deficit, and the smaller the person, the smaller that deficit has to be. Like if I do 1,000 calorie deficit at this point, I'm going to start losing muscle. So, I try to keep and right now I'm trying to grow, so I'm not really at a deficit. I'm at a surplus, but it's all clean food. So I'm not putting fat back on. My goal is to put muscle on. So if you create that 500 calorie a day deficit, that should give you about a 1 pound weight loss per week. Even though that's not my favorite thing to look at, I'd rather look at fat loss versus weight, but that's kind of the thought process on that. And again, macros will change based on goals. Somebody who is a hard gainer and trying to grow muscle versus somebody who is really just focusing on trying to shrink a little bit and feel better and move more. Totally different, right? And also, you know, even if you're doing very, very well, don't ruin all your success during the week and your focus. Don't ruin that on the weekend by, you know, a cheat meal once in a while is fine. I'm not a fan of cheat meals. I'd rather have a free meal. And yes, they are different. A cheat meal is a free for all. A free meal is, hey, I want a pizza. So instead of eating the whole pizza, which I used to be able to do, I might have 1 or 2 pieces and a salad. That's a free meal. It's reasonable. It still takes me above and beyond my calories for the day, spikes my metabolism a little bit, keeps my head focused because I still feel like I'm not sacrificing everything, but it's not crazy and it doesn't completely unravel everything that I've done all week. And if you find that you're one of those people that your cheat meal turns into a cheat day, which turns into a cheat weekend, you might need to avoid cheat meals for a while, just until you can get some of those healthy concepts down so that you know, have the lifestyle and have those habits in place. So hopefully that makes sense. You know, again, I'm not talking about eat more food as in junk food and processed and garbage. I'm talking about stop thinking that 1,200 calories is okay. For, you know, if you haven't seen my book on Amazon, it's called 1,200 Calorie Diets and Other BS. And yeah, I call it the full word, get over it. Because I find diets to be seriously stupid. Last week we talked about when diets are appropriate, which is, again, you have to know that they're short term, but so are the results. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If not, please leave comments below, ask any questions. I get my very best ideas from you. And if you have anything you'd like to talk directly to me about, please just direct message me on Messenger, and I'll get back to you pretty quick, because of course my goal is for you to be the healthiest person you possibly can be, and I really am your biggest fan. So have an incredible night, you guys, and until next week.